Okay, y'all, today we are going to draw Stitch Lantern. He would be a combination of Stitch from the 2002 Disney movie Lilo and Stitch and Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern of Sector 2814 from DC Comics. Before we get into the fun of how to draw the characters and their origins and the fun stories that go along with them, I realized I'm on my third video and I haven't properly introduced myself. My name is Frank. I've been drawing since I was a kid. I've drawn on desks in school. I've taken art classes. I've gone to art college. I started reading comics probably when I was 8 or 9 years old with Archie's. And one day on the newsstand, I saw an issue of X-Men, and the cover was Wolverine turning into a brood. And that got me hooked on superheroes, and I've been drawing them ever since. Alright, as you see, we've gotten far along already because Stitch is not a very complicated character to draw. His head's a big circle, his nose is a big circle, his bodies are lumpy little circles. If you notice, I give him a bit of a more human look than the Stitch look, just so it fits in a little better with the Green Lantern thing, and something I did on all the other Stitches because I have drawn plenty of Stitch mashups. It's one of the more popular things I do, and people tend to gravitate towards them at conventions. I did make his body a little long, and eventually you'll see me shrink it up. And in fact, we're doing that right now. Lilo and Stitch came out in 2002 about an illegal experiment, a little fluffy blue alien, cute as buggers, violent, angry, and he escapes and he crash lands on Earth. He ends up in a pound. The doctor who created him is offered his freedom if he goes to Earth to capture Stitch, and hilarity ensues. Of course, Stitch ends up with Lilo and her sister Nani, and they all learn the lessons of family and Ohana together, and they all live happily ever after. The Green Lantern we'll be referencing is Hal Jordan. He had his first appearance in Showcase number 22 in 1959. Hal Jordan is the second Green Lantern, the Silver Age Green Lantern, the first being Alan Scott, who is the Golden Age Green Lantern, who was the same but different. His powers were more magic-based. His weakness was wood. Hal Jordan is the Silver Age Green Lantern. His weakness is yellow, although I believe they've gotten rid of that since then. He's part of the Silver Age, where comics were more sci-fi based. For a long time, superheroes were out of vogue and people were into horror comics and romance comics, and most superheroes were canceled, including Green Lantern, Flash, Captain America. The only ones that kept running throughout this time consistently were Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. So as you can see, the drawing is coming along. Stitch now has facial features, and we're putting the mask on him now. These drawings go along much faster. This video I think is only 27 minutes long. Okay, and back to the comic books. The Silver Age of comics started in 1956 with the introduction of Barry Allen, the second Flash. With his popularity, they started to introduce more heroes back into the superhero lineup, such as Green Lantern, Aquaman, Hawkman. They introduced new characters like Martian Manhunter, and eventually they all got together to form the first Silver Age team book, the Justice League. As you can see now, we're drawing Stitch's ears, which I find to be the hardest part of the character, because if you get him wrong, he doesn't look very good. He looks kind of ridiculous. So here I'm resizing them, and I work the shapes a little more until I'm finally happy with it. We got something that looks like Stitch. And back to Hal Jordan, his origin varies throughout the decades and years since his first publication, but the way I remember it was he was a test pilot for Ferris Aircraft, some former military pilot. His girlfriend owned the company. She was Carol Ferris. He was flying some kind of top secret jet in the desert. And around the same time, an alien crash landed in the desert. Avon Sur, he was a member of the Green Lantern Corps, an intergalactic peacekeeping agency who protected the universe through their power rings. So he was dying. He was in a fight with Sinestro, I believe, and he needed a replacement to guard the sector. So he needed to find somebody who can overcome great fear and had extremely strong willpower. The ring chose Hal Jordan and brought him to the crash site of Avon Sur, which also crashed a plane. Avon Sur told him about the Green Lantern Corps, gave him the ring, and Hal Jordan accepted. The telling of his origin that I remember most is from 1989, 1990. It was called Emerald Dawn, where Hal Jordan starts out as an alcoholic. He's drinking at a bar. He leaves with his friends after an argument with somebody. He crashes the car. His friend's paralyzed. His brother and his girlfriend are in the hospital. He sneaks out of the hospital at night so he can go to work so he doesn't lose his job. He's not a test pilot at this point because he's been demoted. He's flying flight simulators. While he's in the simulator is ripped off its pedestal and pulled into the desert by fm3, and there he's given the ring. He tells him he's not worthy. fm3 says this doesn't matter. The ring chose you. The ring doesn't make mistakes. You are Green Lantern. After that, Hal flies off and he's testing out the ring and he's all gung-ho, and it's kind of like the Rocketeer movie where he's testing out his abilities, but then he crashes into a sign which knocks him unconscious because the sign is yellow and the ring can't affect anything yellow. And after a few missteps, he finally decides to accept his responsibility and turn himself in. While he's in jail, the jail's attacked by like a yellow robot looking thing calling itself Legion. The Legion is looking for the Green Lantern so the Green Lantern could tell him where the Guardians are. The Guardians of the Universe are the ones who created the rings and the Green Lantern Corps and separated the universe into districts, basically sectors. And the Green Lantern sector is 2814. And just like that, we're on to inking. Again, inking goes fairly quickly too because it's a simple drawing. As you see, it just comes together really quickly. The coloring doesn't take that long. This is a fairly short video compared to the other ones. It's only like a half hour long. I think I said that earlier. So anyway, Hal gets away from Legion, and Legion starts following energy trails to different places the Green Lantern has been. He destroys the hospital he was in, which sadly kills Hal's best friend. Then he goes over to Ferris Aircraft, which is also destroyed, but the monster's still there, so they get no fight. They end up back in the desert in the spaceship that fm3 crashed in, and Hal has the idea to drop a nuclear bomb on him, so the ring takes him to the engine room of the ship, and Hal blows it up. The ring protects him. He thinks he vaporizes Legion, and he asks the ring to take him to another Green Lantern so he can figure out what's going on. The ring takes him to Tomar-Re. They chat a little. Tomar-Re gets a kind of an emergency signal to take them back to Oa. When they get to Oa, nothing's really going on. They just talk about Legion, try to figure out what he is and where he comes from. They assign Hal to work with Kilowog to train to learn how to use the ring and his powers. A couple weeks later, Legion finally shows up. And we'll get back to the drawing for a minute here. As you can see, the head's all inked and Stitch is looking like Stitch. Now we're working on his outfit and his body. It's a pretty straightforward ink job. Nothing fancy to it. There's not a lot of hatching. There's not a lot of black. We just gotta make the Green Lantern symbol and costume and outline his body. And then back to the origin. Legion starts ripping through the Green Lantern Corps. He kills a few Green Lanterns. He follows lanterns around. He's fighting them. And eventually, the Lanterns retreat to wake up the Guardians. The Guardians are more powerful than the Lanterns, and they have fail-safes around to protect them, and they're able to temporarily subdue Legion. While they're Legion subdued, they're wondering what's going on and who it is, and they say that Legion's about to break free because these fail-safes weren't meant to hold something like him. So Hal Jordan has the idea to cut the tether, drag him away, and fly him out basically to a mud patch. He uses the mud to cover up his gold armor so the ring can actually hit him and affect him, and he basically beats him into submission. Of course, Hal Jordan, being a green rookie, he decides to cut open the armor and let Legion out. Legion starts to grow exponentially because he's just a big blob of mass, and he starts engulfing Oa and taking over the world. So the Guardians, since they're not really fighters, they figure it's better just to abandon Oa and start somewhere else. So they tell all the Lanterns to retreat, and they take off. They also mention that the power battery is the ultimate power. So Hal Jordan flies into the power battery, somehow becomes one with it, and when he comes out, he has enough power to defeat Legion and send him into space. When he brings Legion into space, the Guardians don't know what the hell just happened, so they have the rest of the Corps bring Legion back to his home planet, where he hopefully will evolve into a less violent being. And they ask Hal what happened. He's like, I don't know. I don't remember anything. So then the rest of the Lanterns get back. They celebrate, and the Guardians figure that the training is up. They tell Hal that he can now be the Green Lantern in Sector 2814, and they send him back to Earth. When Hal gets back to Earth, he decides to take responsibility for everything that happened on Earth, and he turns himself in. He pleads guilty. He goes to jail. He comes out. Carol's impressed that he was able to take responsibility and served out his sentence. She gives him a job back flying the simulators. And that's where it ends. There's also a sequel called Emerald Dawn 2 that shows what happens while he was in jail, and he's broken out by Sinestro. And Sinestro is Green Lantern's greatest enemy, if you don't know. He was a Green Lantern who fell, and he ended up with a yellow ring that operates on fear. And during the Emerald Dawn 2, it explores how he was more of a tyrant than a hero, and Hal brings him down. And that's what causes him to find the weapons maker's accord, and they make him a yellow ring that operates on fear. So he becomes Green Lantern's greatest nemesis because he cost him his job as a Green Lantern. And of course, the Green Lantern rings of the time were vulnerable to yellow, so his yellow ring was a really hard threat for Hal and other Green Lanterns to overcome. And eventually that led into a war with the Yellow Lanterns, and then from there it turns out there were rings for pretty much all of the emotional spectrum. There was a pink or a violet for love, there's the orange for avarice, there's the red for hate, and a few others I don't remember. There's the black one that can reanimate corpses, and that was the Blackest Night, and that was a big war between all the colors. It's a big mess. And as you can see, as we're finished with Green Lantern's origin, we're also done with the inks. We're about to zoom in and show the final. And now we're about to move on to the colors. Okay, as for coloring Stitch, it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of green, there's some blue, there's some pink, and we just gotta fill in all those spots. So we start out with the green. We're gonna trace around his symbol, then we'll trace around the costume. Fun fact about Green Lanterns is they wear white gloves. The white gloves are a symbol of purity. And the third Green Lantern, John Stewart, he went through a bunch in his life, and he decided at one point that he didn't deserve to wear the white gloves, so he took them off. And he was posted on a planet that was a patchwork of different civilizations from all over the galaxy that were displaced, I think, by Parallax. I should probably tell you who Parallax is. Parallax is Hal Jordan when he went evil. Back in 1993, they had the whole Death of Superman thing. And as part of the Death of Superman, Coast City was destroyed, which was the home city for Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan, being consumed by guilt, lost his mind, and he tried to bring the city back using his ring, except his ring wasn't powerful enough. So he went out to get more rings, and he fought, and he defeated a bunch of Green Lanterns. I think he even killed a few, and he stole their rings, and he started to rebuild the city. The Guardians said this was not acceptable, and they tried to stop him, and they didn't do a very good job. So they resurrected Sinestro to stop him. Sinestro also failed. Hal actually ends up snapping Sinestro's neck. After that, Hal defeats the Guardians, and he absorbs all the power of the central power battery. He loses his mind, and he becomes the villain known as Parallax. One of the Lanterns escapes. His name is Ganthet, and he has Hal Jordan's original ring, and he goes to Earth, and he gives it to Kyle Rayner, who becomes the new Green Lantern of Earth. He was an artist, and his story is responsible for one of those big memes known as fridging, whereas his first villain, Major something or another, I don't remember his name, it's not important. To get to him, he kills his girlfriend and shoves her in a refrigerator. When Kyle sees his girlfriend in the refrigerator, he loses his mind, he defeats the villain, and he goes on to become the great new Green Lantern. The problem with that is his girlfriend only existed to die and to cause the hero to step up and become who he was meant to be. So back then, the women were kind of treated more as a plot point than actual characters, and the way that his girlfriend was murdered and put in the refrigerator started the term fridging. So anytime a character like a woman is used as basically just a plot point to get killed to motivate the hero, it's known as fridging. So Kyle Rayner, when he first was created, he wasn't very popular, and people didn't like him as Green Lantern. They complained a lot and wrote many letters to DC how they wanted Hal Jordan back, they wanted John Stewart back, they wanted Guy Gardner, who I don't even think I've mentioned yet in this video, and I was in a class, and we had a guest speaker who was one of the editors of DC at the time, and he's like, yep, if people just shut their mouths and read the story, Kyle Rayner probably would have been around for 3 to 4 months, and we would have moved on, and went back to the Green Lanterns everybody knows and loves. But since they were so vocal about it and they hated it so much, they kept buying the issues and they were selling. So they just kept stringing them along with what's going to happen, and they tortured them with Kyle Rayner at the time. He's since become a much better character and one of the most beloved of the Green Lanterns, but back then everybody hated him. Okay, now we're coloring Stitch's face. To get the colors, I just downloaded a picture of Stitch off the internet and I selected them and used the blues and the pinks that come off of the actual Disney photos of Stitch. I didn't show that part because I didn't know if there would be copyright issues using an actual Disney Stitch picture to use as reference for the drawing, but the only thing I used were the colors. So I should talk about Guy Gardner. Guy Gardner was also another Green Lantern of Earth. There's a bunch of them now. I don't even know them all. But at the time, there was 3. There was Hal Jordan, there's John Stewart, and there's Guy Gardner. When Abin Sur crash landed on Earth from earlier on in the video, we talked about him. To give Hal Jordan the ring, it chose Hal Jordan because he was the closest. The second closest was Guy Gardner, so he was not chosen. So when Hal Jordan was incapacitated for some reason at one time, I don't remember, this was a long time ago, they gave the ring to Guy Gardner, and Guy Gardner became Green Lantern, and then eventually Hal got it back. And then there's 2 Green Lanterns, and something happened to Guy Gardner. He had some kind of brain injury, and he ended up being a little crazy and a little gung-ho and a little off the cuff and a little unstable. But he served as a Green Lantern for a long time, and he was even a Red Lantern for a while. And in the first issue of Justice League International, he gets one-punched by Batman. It's a pretty famous comic panel. And Guy Gardner is also going to be featured in the new Superman movie that James Gunn is making that comes out in July. So back to Hal Jordan. He's been Parallax for a while. He's been a villain. He's done some vile things. And then there was a story called Final Night where the sun's going out. One of the Sun Eaters, I think, attacks the Earth. That's a whole nother thing. And Superman's losing his powers because there's no yellow sunlight. And then Hal Jordan shows up, and he, as Parallax, decides to sacrifice himself by reigniting the sun and saving the Earth. He also dies in the process. While he's dead, he takes up a short stint as the Spectre, who is the spirit of vengeance, God's hand of vengeance, and eventually Jeff Johns decides he wants to rehab Green Lantern and bring him back to his former glory. So that starts a story called Green Lantern Rebirth. I don't remember all the details of it, but basically they resurrect Hal Jordan, and it turns out that he wasn't responsible for all the evil that Parallax did. Parallax was actually the yellow impurity in the rings. It was a demon that the Guardians imprisoned in the power battery because it was the only thing strong enough to hold him, and that's what made the Green Lantern rings vulnerable to yellow. And when Hal Jordan merged with the battery way back in Emerald Twilight, Parallax was able to get a hold of him and start putting doubt into his mind and fear and taking over, and it eventually took him over, and that's what caused him to turn evil and become Parallax. Somehow they're able to separate Parallax from Hal Jordan. They all defeat Parallax. Hal Jordan becomes a Green Lantern again, and all is right in the DC universe. And as a side effect of that, there's no more yellow impurity in the rings, so the rings are no longer vulnerable to yellow, so the rings pretty much have no weakness at this point. Okay, and back to coloring Stitch. You see I went back to using the dots. In Spider-Man, I only used black dots as a shading thing, and then I colored over them with a darker red. And here I'm using darker greens and darker blues and darker purples in shading using the dots. It's just another way to do it. As you can see, I'm using the selection tool to select the colors, so when I'm going over with the dots, they stay where they're supposed to be, and you can be a little freer with it. And also I'm going in and adding the dots to the grays. So I hope this video isn't too much of a departure from the previous videos of just drawing superheroes, because this is something else that I do. I mash characters up and I put them together and I make scenarios and I make art prints of them and I sell them at conventions and whatnot. And Stitch is one of the most popular ones. I've done a Stitch Spider-Man, I've done a Stitch Venom, I've done a Stitch Doctor Strange, a Stitch Spider-Man, an Angel, the girl Stitch as Wonder Woman, as Gwenpool. So there's a lot of varieties of Stitches that I've done, and this is just another one of those, and I figured I'd share that with you guys. In the next video, we go back to superheroes, but I do something a little different, and I actually draw buildings for the background. And you'll see that next week when that video comes out. I'm also going to branch out into some anime characters that I like and some other cartoons and just add some variety to things, and we'll see what you guys like and we'll decide on things from there and from suggestions. Closer to the Fantastic Four movie coming out, I'm going to do a Galactus Silver Surfer, which was recommended by one of the viewers. Somebody else recommended Spawn, so I'm going to do that. I'm probably going to do My Hero Academia one coming up soon, and maybe a Demon Slayer and other things like that that I've watched recently. So for a lot of people, the Green Lantern most people know nowadays is John Stewart. I think that might still be the case, because he was the Green Lantern featured in the Justice League cartoon that was on for a bunch of years, and he was the prominent Green Lantern. I don't think they even showed Green Lantern in that series. And I think Guy Gardner maybe made a quick cameo. Well, one of my favorite artists is a guy named Duncan Raoul. He has a very cartoony style. I actually got a couple pages that he drew off eBay. One actually features Guy Gardner and Superman. And back in the day, you get that stuff really cheap if you bought them off the inkers. And he did a Justice League story where the Justice League is taken over by Mouth. Mouth is a character who, it's basically a moth, and whatever they whisper in your ear, it gets in your head and you have to do that. Well, they whispered something into Jon Stewart's ear. I forgot exactly what it was, and it put him into sort of a fight or flight survival mode, and he freaked out, and he put a green bubble around this whole encampment, and it trapped everybody in, and nobody get in, nobody go out. It was such a strong bubble that Superman couldn't even punch through it. And eventually he came to his senses and everybody got out, and it's a well-drawn story. It's a good read, and I think it's a two-parter. So here, I skipped over the whole thing, but we drew the energy effect on Green Lantern's ring. And with that, I basically just did a bunch of squiggly lines in various colors and added the glow, and I'm throwing dots around it to give it more. And once I add the background, which I'm pretty sure I went with a blue again, it starts to pop and you can see the glowing effect of the ring. And nothing fancy, just a bunch of squiggly lines and various colors to bring it all together. So after the War of Light, with all the different Green Lanterns and the different color rings and everything happens, that's at a time where Batman was considered dead. He got shot with the Omega beams by Darkseid and sent back through time, and a villain called Necron dug up his grave and stole his skull, and he created a Black Lantern, and the Black Lantern created black rings, and it would reanimate corpses. It reanimated a version of Superman, the Earth 2 Superman, Wonder Woman, Batman, and if it landed on a living hero, that hero would basically die and be reanimated as a Black Lantern. And I don't exactly remember how that one ended either, but that was a good one. And then that one ended up going into Brightest Day, where a White Lantern ring was created, and the White Lantern was the most powerful of them all because that combined all the lights into one white ring, and so that one could do pretty much everything. And I think Kyle Reiner eventually ended up becoming the White Lantern after it went through a bunch of people like Batman and Deadman and Hal Jordan. As you can see with this one, I'm just doing another textured background with a few shapes, and I'm filling in all the white that got lost because I covered it up with the blue and the texture, so we got to add the white back in. And as you can see, the green burst coming off of his hand, that stands out a lot more when you put it on a dark background. And I'd like to apologize for those who showed up hoping to learn a lot about Stitch, but the truth is I don't really know a lot about Stitch. I've just seen the first movie a few times because my son liked it a lot when he was younger, and I've seen the TV show, but it didn't really leave a lasting impression on me, so I don't really remember much about it other than the bounty hunter shark guy coming after Stitch all the time. And here we're putting a little swirl behind Stitch to focus on him, kind of like the same thing we did with Daredevil and the webs and the radar sense, and Spider-Man with the webs pointing to the center. It's always good to have something draw you to the part of the drawing you want people to see, and I think that the swirl kind of brings you into where Stitch is. And since Stitch doesn't actually have a texture on him, right here we're working to texturize Stitch so he doesn't stand out so much against the texturized background. And then we darken him up a little bit, and we're getting to the end of the video. Here we are, we're still messing around with shading and adding textures and just getting Stitch to a point where I'm happy with him. And I left this in. I don't know why I did, but basically I go through a lot of the color modes to show you what they do to the different textures in the backgrounds. Not a really valuable thing to know because I don't really talk about it at all, and it goes by too fast for me to explain it all. But here we just put a few rough edges around the drawing because I think that it needed something a little more than just floating in space. And it's something that if I ever decide to make a print or put it onto a t-shirt, we'll delete the black and it'll kind of give it a ripped poster edge, and it'll blend into whatever the background color is for the t-shirt or the white paper. And it's just another trick I use to keep things looking a little more interesting. Another thing I'm learning doing the voiceover for this video is I'm probably going to have to do the voiceovers at night because I've had to stop many times for motorcycles going by and dogs barking and downstairs neighbors talking, and a car alarm went off for like 10 minutes and there was a fire truck. So I'm hoping when I do these at night there'll be a lot less noise, and if you hear any of that in the background of this video, again, I apologize because there's no real way for me to remove it aside from re-recording this whole thing again, and I just don't really think I want to do that. And here we just added in shading of the teeth, and with that we're going to call this one done. So I thank you all for stopping by and watching me do a Stitch lantern, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great week, everybody.